Alright, greetings folks. Hello and welcome back. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Going to be disassembling the Ten-Tec 238. See if we can figure out what's wrong with that switch. Should be a little better. This case has definitely been apart a few times. These screw heads are not in the best condition. I would imagine, being an older tuner, it wouldn't surprise me that it's been taken apart a few times. But, you know, we'll see what we can see. Sure that just lifts off like that. There we go. Set that over there for now. The glasses. All right. Let's take a look and see. Well, the roller part seems to be all right. This capacitor seems to be okay. I don't see any. Hold it up there a little bit. There we go. I'm looking at this big capacitor here, looking for any signs of arcing. I don't see any. It turns real smooth. It works just normally. And then this roller coil over here turns okay. I don't see anything necessarily wrong with that. It's got a string. You may or may not be able to see it on the camera, but that little red gauge in there, that little red marker, it's plastic, corresponds to the inductor along this bar gauge here. So as you turn your inductor, you get a gauge. This is when, of course, it's lit up when it's powered on, but you get a gauge that, you get a marker line that moves on the scale and tells you where your inductor is. So this apparently was the problem as far as I know. I think the antenna switch was okay. It was this bypass. We've got a low Z and a high Z. And then bypass, of course, should be zero, neutral, or nothing. Low Z and high Z. And then an SWR set. Forward, reverse. It's got a 2 kilowatt or a 200 watt scale for the meter. And then it has these little button switches for changing between power and SWR, before power and reflected power. And then a selection for 4 different antennas that all, of course, connect in the back. But apparently my friend said the bypass here, or the high Z, low Z switch was not working. Alright, so apparently there's a shaft. I'll try and get a picture of this here on the camera in a minute, but there's a carbon shaft or fiberglass shaft here that goes from the switch in the front to the plates in the back. I don't think there's anything up front here necessarily, but Yeah. It almost looks like it was bent out of place on purpose at the factory. I'm not entirely sure that's broken. It looks odd. I'm going to get the camera and see if I can point it down in here so y'all can see what I'm talking about. But I'm not entirely sure that's not by design. Might be easier just to see if I can zoom in. Okay. Grab my pointer here. All right, what he's looking at is this part of the switch right here. Now if you watch, just see if I can get a better light on there. Let me hold on just a second. Let me see if I can get a better light. So there's the switch. And as the low Z high Z switch, and as we turn it, you can see that it changes. There's a plate in the middle, and then there's fingers on the outside. Remember I talked about yesterday like having these fingers on it. I don't know if it'll focus that close or not. Alright, so in any event, it moves through all the positions the way it should. I think what he saw was right here. Hard to see. Sorry. I know it's tough to see. But there's a pin. There's a fold in the steel right here. This is actually bent, folded away from the backing plate. So it's at this position in the switch, it's not making any contact. So it looks like right here, like this part of the metal is bent. It's bent away from and not making contact with this point right here, or that point down there. It's actually bent away from the plate. And I don't know if changing the angle would help. Probably not. But it's actually bent away from the plate a little bit. And it looks like it's damaged. You know, it looks like it's been folded for some reason. Like somebody grabbed a screwdriver and pulled it back. See that V-shaped point in it? Almost like it got pulled back away from the plate, away from that part of it, like somebody took a screwdriver just like I am and just like folded this out of the way. But I'm not entirely sure that's a problem. It's that is really stiff. I mean, this piece of metal is incredibly stiff. I'd have a really hard time imagining that somebody could break it or bend it just by operating the switch. See, it moves through all the other positions just fine. Even when you come to the part that's supposedly broken, there's no hindrance, there's no... I'm wondering if maybe that section was pulled away on purpose. Like that's the factory piece. Sorry about the camera, guys. Like that's the way it should be from the factory. What I'm gonna have to do So what that means to me is that if I hook it up upstairs in the shack, follow the procedure in the manual, all right, set capacitor, inductor, SWR set it to bypass, and then feed in a little bit of power, and then see which way is better. Now, if I can't get any of the high Z or low Z settings to allow me to tune that antenna on all the bands between 10 meters and 160, which a tuner like this should be able to easily tune a long wire antenna that's got a transformer at the end of it. It's a 50 ohm coax coming into the shack, and the little LDG tuner has no trouble tuning it up on all the bands. This should be the same. This switch may not, in fact, be bad. So what I'm going to do is put the case back on it, because when you're operating these tuners, there's a great deal of voltage inside. You don't want the cover off. You don't want to get anywhere near any of these coils, especially during high power transmissions. So I'm going to button it back up, take it upstairs, take all the camera gear upstairs, and see if I can actually tune the antenna before I start worrying about whether this switch is broken. I'm not entirely convinced it is. I think that's factory set. I think it was designed that the sweep, there's a metal band that kind of goes all the way around it. I think it was pulled away from one little part of that switch in order to give this switch the necessary connections it needed along all the finger points, along all the switch points. Yeah, that's my thought. Anyway, so we're going to grab all the gear, take it all upstairs, and see what we got. Sorry about the barking dog. I let her out and she likes to bark at just about everything. Anyway, let's hook it up, see if it works. Ground load's a little stiff. All right. Let's grab our coax in. Have to push that back. All right. Well, at least for now, it's up there, and all the connections are made. And I'm going to readjust the camera so you can see it while I adjust it, and then see if it works. So I'm going to rearrange the camera. Okay, sorry if the audio is not great. I'm a distance away from the camera and I don't have my microphone on. That's about the best shot I can give you of the Ten-Tec. I don't have the right connector to give lights to the panel. It takes a 12 volt DC connector, and I've got 12 volts DC, but it's an RCA jack in the back of this model. I mean, it is an older model, and 12 volts was supplied through an RCA jack, which I don't have. So I'm going to make up a cable at some point, but for now, at least you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to set it up per the manual and see what we can do. So I'll go through step by step and see what happens. All right, let's see here. So to get it going, first thing we need to do, set the meter switch to reflected and SWR. Okay. Well, in this case, if it's out, it's forward power, so we want reflected power. We're probably going to put it on the 200 watt scale, since we're not going to go much above 100 watts to start. And then the power switch is either forward power or SWR, and according to the manual it says SWR. Set the capacitor, which is this big knob, to 2. I'm sitting a little low and to the right of this, so it's a little hard to see. So if I'm off a little bit, please don't be critical. It's just I'm looking at it from an angle. Set the inductor to full scale. This is the inductor, which is full clockwise. It's got a mechanical stop that limits it. The S1 to 50 ohms bypass, right up the middle. I also have antenna 1 chosen. That's the long wire. It's actually an inverted L. It's like a Marconi inverted L. So we'll call it the inverted L on antenna selector 1. It says apply enough transmitter drive to obtain a half scale meter reading. It's about half scale. You may or may not be able to see it, but it's definitely coming up half scale. Ah, here we go. Now it's starting to come down. There we go. There we go. Okay, so that's a 1-to-1. If the capacitor shows best meter null at 0, and we're pretty close to 0 right there, turn S1 to the other side of the 50 ohm bypass. So right now we're on bypass 1, and it says the instructions say go to the other side. Once a null is reached, to determine if the SWR is sufficiently low, set the meter switch to forward and adjust the SWR set control to the full scale set mark. Alright, make sure we're still at null. Aha, see now that went worse again. So this is let's get our capacitor back. Aha, here we go. Perfect, now we're at a 1-to-1 SWR. Yep, beautiful, there we go. Okay, that's about as close as it's going to get, but I will check on the ICOM 7100, which also has an SWR meter, just to see if I can get it a little tiny touch better. Perfect, that's about 1.2, 1.3 to 1, as shown on the 7100. Okay, so that sets that. This is at 7, this is at 7, right there is pretty good. I'm on actually the 30 meter band at the moment, just because that's what I happen to pick. Once a null is reached, to determine if the SWR is low, set the meter switch to forward, set that to forward, adjust the SWR set control, that's this knob down here, and adjust the SWR set control to the full scale set mark. Right there. Set back to reverse, it's actually reflected power, and read SWR on the lower meter scale. A reading less than 1.5 to 1 is acceptable. Oh yeah, it's not even moving the needle. All right, let's get our power up here. All right, this is 90 watts, and our SWR is basically 1-to-1. For all practical purposes. So that seems to be working. Our capacitor is kind of in the middle. It's about 6.5 to 7. So we've got room on the capacitor to adjust back and forth if needed. I mean, these settings are going to change a little depending on if the wire stretches, if the weather is you know, if the wire is wet, if, I don't know about wet, but, you know, if that wire is up in a tree, and it's going to probably stretch a little bit as it gets windy and things like that happen. So as that happens, these settings are going to change a little. But right now, with the inductor being, actually it's right about, it's hard to see, but it's right at number 3 on this scale. That's the inductor. The bypass is at 1, and the capacitor is at the lower end of 7. It's a little hard for me to see from over here. But at this point right here, I have a 1-to-1 on the 30 meter band. So what I'm going to do is take a picture of it. Let me get my phone. I'm going to take a picture of this setup so I know where my numbers are for 30 meters, for example. And I'm also going to write it down on a pad of paper. In fact, I think I'll write it down first. And maybe we'll take a picture later. So for the 30 meter band, and this is all in the CW portion of the band, if I were to go up to single sideband, especially on a really wide band, like 10 meters is really wide, these would change quite a bit from the CW portion of 10 meters up to the SSB or even the FM side of 10 meters. That would be, I wouldn't run FM on this tuner, but you know what I mean. Hi guys, we're going to take a very short timeout here, and I have to confess that I was going a little quickly with tuning up on some of the bands. I had a little bit of trouble trying to find where the SWR would start to come down, and I kind of forgot what it means to work with a manual tuner. Primarily that they can be quite sensitive, and turning the capacitor here on the tuner a very, very tiny amount makes a pretty big difference. Another thing I forgot, I knew this and I just haven't used a manual tuner in a while. I forgot that you can actually get in the ballpark of where you're supposed to be with a manual tuner by listening, by using your ears. And I'll demonstrate. I'm going to turn up the volume on the radio and hopefully you can hear it. And as I turn the capacitor, you'll hear the volume decrease and then increase again, and decrease and increase. And when we come up to that point with an increase in the volume, with the maximum amount of volume, generally speaking, you're in the ballpark of where the antenna is it's a good starting point for where to tune your inductance with this L network matching tuner. So I'll demonstrate. Here, listen with your ears. That's as loud as my radio goes. Hopefully you can hear that. Oh, got loud. Got very loud right there. And now it gets quiet again. And now it gets loud. And it gets quiet as I go the other way. So what I'm doing is I'm searching for the middle point. Right about there, where it's loudest. In any event, I've tuned all of the bands on the tuner. It works just fine. The 160 meter band, it really comes right at the edge of what the tuner can tune. I think my antenna wire could probably be a little bit longer and it would be easier for it to tune up on 160, but it's all the way at the extremes. And the Z setting switch that I thought was broken works just fine. In fact, on 160 meters, that's my dog. Shh. Hey. Oh, that's too much fun. Okay, for the 160 meter band, the Z switch has to be on the high side all the way up at maximum, at number 5. So the bypass, it's not in bypass, the Z switch is all the way up at 5. The inductor is all the way down at the bottom, and the capacitance is all the way up at the top. And it's like right at the very edge of everything. The antenna is in tune and I can use it. 20 meters, I don't need the antenna tuner at all. It's 1.2 to 1, just naturally occurring. I don't know what that is, 5/8 wave, maybe? Certainly not a half wave, not 114 feet long, but in any event. The tuner works fine, the switch works fine. I'm going to keep it, obviously, in the shack. I'm going to reposition some of the other things. I had to take down my Cantronics box and move it out of the way, and you know, yada, yada, yada. There's a few things I need to do to make sure that this is going to fit in this space, but it works. It works great. I have tunability on 10 through 160. No trouble. Nothing wrong with the switch at all. It is very sensitive. You saw me earlier in the video. I'm like spinning knobs and stuff. That's not how you use a manual tuner. Very, very small adjustments to get to that point where you can fine tune it and get it down to the lowest SWR possible. All right, I am Robert, KE0STT. Thank you so much for watching. The Ten-Tec works. I'm really happy about that. Now we're going to move on to organizing some of the cabling behind here. I really needed to decide exactly what equipment came in first before we run all of the cables, get everything nice and neat and tidy, get everything up off the floor. This is going to be the way that the shack is going to ride for quite some time. Super happy. Tune in for another episode. We're going to go and do all the wiring and stuff, and then keep moving forward with outside antenna work as soon as the snow melts and the sun starts shining again. I'm Robert, KE0STT. Thank you so much for watching. Take care, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.